Air India flight to London with more than 200 people on board has crashed.
And the crash of that Air India plane bound for London.
There are no survivors in the plane crash.
A brand new Dreamliner takes off from Ahmedabad. Within a minute, a distress call is heard over the radio, and then silence. 242 people on board, a neighborhood full of life, and a fireball that consumed everything. What followed had never happened before in the history of this aircraft. Flight AI-171 was scheduled to depart on June 12th from Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel International Airport in Ahmedabad, India, bound for London, Gatwick. On board, 230 passengers and 12 crew members, with a mix of nationalities. 169 from India, 53 from the UK, 7 from Portugal, and 1 from Canada. The aircraft was a Boeing 787-8 Dreamliner, registration VT-ANB, a modern twin-engine wide-body jet designed for long-haul flights. This particular aircraft had been flying for Air India for over 10 years and had undergone major maintenance earlier this year. The weather that day was clear. No storms, no fog, no visibility issues. On the ground, everything seemed to be going according to plan. At 13:38 local time, AI-171 received clearance to take off from runway 23. The first few seconds were normal. Speed, liftoff, climb. But before the first minute had passed, something went wrong. Flight radar 24 showed a normal climb during the first seconds, but at just 625 feet, barely 200 meters above the ground, the flight began to behave abnormally. One thing stood out. Witnesses and video footage showed that the landing gear was still extended, something that's normally retracted shortly after takeoff. Sudden changes in direction, an abrupt descent, and then a distress call. "Mayday, mayday!" The radio signal came through briefly, and then nothing. Witnesses on the ground saw the aircraft tilt sharply. Some suspected an engine failure. Others described hearing a bang like something snapped. At 13:39, flight AI-171 disappeared from radar, and less than a minute later, an explosion shook Megani Nagar, a densely populated neighborhood filled with apartment buildings, markets, and a student hostel. The Boeing Dreamliner crashed at full speed into a medical training facility. The impact was devastating. The aircraft had been fully fueled for the long journey to London. Fuel spilled from the wings. Flames spread rapidly. Bystanders saw black smoke, collapsed walls, and chaos. The crash struck the BG Medical College hostel right during lunch break. Inside were 50 to 60 students, half-eaten meals on tables. Under the rubble were students, hospital staff, local residents, and fragments of the plane. Megani Nagar, just north of the city center, is packed with narrow streets, old buildings, and student housing. That density made the impact even more destructive. What began as a routine flight ended in total chaos, and at that moment, no one knew if anyone had survived. Within minutes of the explosion, the neighborhood was flooded with sirens. Fire trucks, ambulances, police units. No fewer than 6 teams from the National Disaster Response Force were deployed for rescue and recovery. Several specialized teams worked their way through the rubble. Parts of the building were still burning. Other sections had completely collapsed. Bystanders, many of them students and local residents, formed human chains. They carried victims to safety, passed bottles of water, and shouted names into the dust. The heat was intense. The smoke choked everything, but the search continued. Rescue workers used thermal cameras and search dogs to locate survivors. An estimated 70% of the building was cleared within the first 4 hours. But beneath the debris, bodies were also found. According to police reports, one passenger was found alive in seat 11A, 40-year-old British Indian Vishwas Kumar Ramesh. Local authorities say he managed to escape by jumping out of an emergency window. Severely injured but conscious, he was immediately taken to a nearby hospital. Hours after the disaster, Ahmedabad Police Commissioner G.S. Malik gave an initial assessment. "There appears to be no survivor in the crash," he said. He emphasized that there were also casualties on the ground, as the aircraft had crashed into a densely populated residential area. Police later released an official list of 25 injured individuals. According to the additional Chief Secretary of the Gujarat Health Department, around 50 people were taken to civil hospital in Ahmedabad, including residents, students, and staff members from the affected medical complex. Air India set up emergency help desks for the families of those affected. Local authorities urged citizens to donate blood, and Ahmedabad airport was temporarily shut down. On social media, images of the wreckage began to circulate. Collapsed facades, stunned faces, and scenes of destruction. Local media interviewed residents who described a thunderous bang and windows blown out from the pressure. Some initially thought it was an earthquake. One resident said, "I saw the wing of the plane scraping right past our apartment. Then, fire. Fire everywhere." Everyone could feel it. This was no ordinary incident. It shook an entire city and far beyond. While rescue workers were still combing through the rubble, the first official reactions came in. Prime Minister Narendra Modi called the incident heart-wrenching and promised maximum support for the victims and their families. The British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, called it a devastating crash and activated consular support for the British nationals involved. Air India confirmed that flight AI-171 had been involved in a serious incident shortly after departure. They set up a dedicated helpline and launched an internal investigation. Boeing released a brief statement. They were aware of the incident and would fully cooperate with authorities. Still, Boeing's stock dropped by 8% on the US market shortly after the news. Out of respect for the victims, Air India's parent company, Tata Group, announced compensation of 10 million rupees, roughly $127,000 per victim. The Directorate General of Civil Aviation confirmed it would launch a full investigation in cooperation with the Air Accident Investigation Branch. Boeing also sent technical experts to Ahmedabad to assist. All attention now turns to uncovering what happened in those critical moments. Cockpit communication, engine status, sensor readings. Investigators from the DGCA, the AAIB, and the National Transportation Safety Board from the United States are jointly leading the investigation. The black boxes, the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder have been recovered and handed over to the DGCA. They will be analyzed in collaboration with the AAIB and the NTSB. Initial findings may take days or even weeks, depending on the condition of the data. According to multiple sources, eyewitnesses reported hearing a loud bang, likely from the left engine. Some suggested it may have indicated a sudden loss of power, possibly caused by a bird strike shortly after takeoff. However, investigators emphasize it is still too early to draw conclusions. Only the black boxes can reveal what really happened in those final seconds. Initial analyses from Flight Radar 24 and aviation data point to a possible configuration error during takeoff. The landing gear remained extended, and the flaps, which are essential for generating lift at low speeds, may have been incorrectly deployed or not deployed at all. Experts describe a lack of lift, despite clear efforts from the pilots to pull the aircraft upward. What began as a routine climb turned within seconds into a struggle against gravity. In the meantime, the airspace around Ahmedabad was temporarily closed. Some flights were diverted, and at the airport itself, a heavy silence lingered. The city is in mourning. The aviation world holds its breath, because if even a Dreamliner can go down like this, then nothing feels certain anymore. What makes the tragedy even more shocking, it wasn't just the location, not just the number of lives lost. What makes this crash truly historic is that it was the first fatal accident involving a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Since its introduction in 2011, this aircraft type with over 1,000 units in service worldwide had maintained an impressive safety record. Praised for its lightweight composite structure, fuel-efficient engines, and state-of-the-art safety systems, the Dreamliner was considered by many airlines to be the future of long-haul travel. But on June 12, 2025, that changed in an instant. While some earlier 787s had experienced technical issues, such as battery failures and cracks in engine casings, these had always been manageable. But this time, something went wrong. The exact cause remains unknown. How could one of the most advanced aircrafts in the world crash so quickly? Was it human error? A technical malfunction? Or something no one could have predicted? Those questions now lie in the hands of investigators. What happened on June 12th wasn't an in-flight emergency at cruising altitude. It was a full-blown catastrophe, right after takeoff, in the middle of a residential area. The cause? Still unknown, but the consequences are lasting. Families remain in uncertainty. Investigators are working around the clock, and the entire aviation world is holding its breath. This tragedy reminds us just how thin the line can be between a routine flight and a nightmare. Perhaps that's what makes it so heartbreaking. Everything seemed in order. The aircraft, the weather, the crew, everything seemed fine. And yet, it still went wrong. The tragedy of AI 171 has left families in grief and many questions unanswered. Out of respect for those affected, we ask you to share your thoughts with care and compassion. And if you believe real stories like this deserve to be told, hit subscribe and help us reach 200K before the year ends.